Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Stardust here. Welcome to part 2 of episode 4, which is a weird introduction. I am back here with Hero Mentor. Hero Mentor, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Well, we were having a little conversation before I clicked record. For anyone who doesn't know, I've been on break for a couple of days, just with my fiance, spending some time, and well, I come back and the world just didn't like me. I returned to an aggressive cat. My battery not working. On the laptop, so I'm using this very same laptop, but luckily it's not going down crazy paces, so we should be okay. I tripped over my headset wire, so I hope it works. And like, there's just they're very very unlucky. But today isn't about me. It's about Hero Mentor, the star of the show, especially with all the people who seem to love the last episode. So obviously, on the last episode, I mentioned that we spoke so much Avengers. I want to go into a bit more of like your personal life, things you've experienced before, and stuff like that. So I think one of the big ones is you spoke about in the last episode where you got the name Hero Mentor from. So I think going into your youth mentorship is probably a really good start. So how did that come about? What made you sort of want to become a speaker for youths, and a mental health sort of I can't think of the right word. Well, as you put it, mental health valiant. There you go.
Got it. Good job. You recovered well there.
Thank you, thank you.
First off, props for that. So, long story short, because when I do a lot of speaking appearances and podcast appearances, I always give the warning that my story is 35 years long. So, long story short, in regards to the question you just asked, I was in brain injury rehab in 2011 with my 15th concussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going through a separation. I was going through a career change. I just lost my career in security and bodyguard work. So it was a really, really dark time for me where I didn't really know where my future, my life, or anything was going. I was diagnosed with severe depression, diagnosed with high functioning and illness anxiety, diagnosed with my 15th concussion, and I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to balance, had to learn how to work out and train as I did before. So it was a very trying time for me. However, it was what I call a heroic evolution because I had to find that internal hero to overcome all these villains that was in my mind because I was dealing with so much triggers and stressors at one time to the point that my psychologist even said that she's surprised I'm still alive. And I'm like, holy cow, when your psychologist says a statement like that,
Yeah.
it's like an eye opener as to what am I dealing with here? And she's like, you have all the areas that are very common with triggering depression active. She's like, every part of your life right now is confused. I'm like, yes. I'm like, I couldn't hold my son because I was having such bad dizzy spells and I had so much weakness and fatigue. So like my entire life was changed, and I just spent the 5 months just trying to heal. And then I realized that I didn't want to recover to where I was. I wanted to get better. So my favorite thing with people who are going through injuries or recovery is don't have the mindset to recover to where you were before the injury. Have a mindset to recover to where you're stronger and you're better, like you're improved. So when I had the mindset of, okay, I'm not going to do this to get back to where I was, I'm going to do this to get better, it was like a huge motivation for me where it's like, okay, you know what? I'm starting from 0% again, and I'm going to come back at 100%, but at 100% in a different mindset and a different focus. Part of my rehab process with brain injury was seeing a counselor that was helping me basically adapt back into my new reality of a new career, a new job, new focus, which was very helpful because having ADHD itself, it's very hard for many of us to keep a job. It's very hard for us to stay interested in work that we don't really like. So
Mm.
I've always struggled keeping jobs. The only reason why I was able to have a career for 8 years in security and bodyguard work is because I genuinely loved it.
Yeah.
Genuinely loved it. I loved what I was doing. I had so much passion for it. Before that, I was pursuing professional wrestling. And when I lost that dream, I was like, okay, I need to find a second one that brings me just as much adrenaline because a lot of ADHDers, we thrive on adrenaline. We thrive on just pure excitement. And pro wrestling was a way for me to get
I
that.
can't wait for
But
us to go
then
into detail about pro wrestling, by the way. Sorry to cut you off there. I am really
no
excited.
worries.
Really excited for that conversation. Anyway, sorry to
I
cut you off.
was I was prepared for your interruption there. Don't worry. Um, and then I was like, I accidentally got into security work. My dad was working at Calgary Stampede for many, many years as a security officer, and he's like, you know what, we need some big guys for security. And I was like, all right, I'll do it for fun. I had a lot of social anxiety at this time, so I was like, the idea of approaching people who were intoxicated or whatnot was nothing that I ever assumed I would love to do. However, the first altercation I got in security was asking a guy to leave the premises because he was urinating in public and he decided to throw down and I just got hooked. I was like, oh my goodness, I love this. So I started just studying that extensively, going to college, studying self-defense for 8 years, and I took it so much further than I thought I was ever going to go. So when I lost that dream, because my ultimate goal with that area was to become a police officer, work the street cop for 5 years, and then I wanted to go to SWAT. So
Hmm.
like I've always had, when it comes to my mindset, it's never climb a mountain and then celebrate. It's climb a mountain, celebrate, and then find another mountain to climb. I've always been that focused mindset of like getting better and striving for more. So I was like, okay, I'll become a cop. I'll do the street work for 5 years. I'll become a SWAT, and I will retire as a captain. Like that was like my entire journey planned.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with professional wrestling. I had all this journey planned, and like I said last episode, I never had a plan B because people who are neurodivergent, we don't like plan Bs because we don't like admitting that our plan A will fail. However, both my plan A's failed, which means I didn't have a plan B for either one. So that is probably why I had so much anxiety in 2011 when I was in rehab for my 15th concussion because I'm like, I have nothing else planned. And then we were just talking about like what my dreams were, and I was like, I've always had this dream of being an entertainer. However, I never had a dream of being famous because with social anxiety, being famous is something that does not really sit well with me. But I wanted to be someone that people looked up to. And my therapist is like, well, have you ever considered public speaking? And I was like, hell no. Because when I was in school, I was petrified of speaking. I would skip classes. I would pretend to be sick, anything to avoid presentations in the
Yeah.
class. So I was like, no, I'm like, my number one fear is public speaking. And it's funny because the number one fear in the world is public speaking second to death. So people are so petrified of public speaking. So I never thought about it. So we were making plans of, working at video game stores, working at comic stores. And I told him, I was like, it has to be aligned with my passion. If it's a job that I have no creative future with, it's a job that I have no ladder, I cannot physically do it. I become very ill because I become so mentally triggered. And he's like, okay. So I started working at a video game store, and then one of my old junior high friends calls me, and she's like, hey, I'm with a group called We Can Rise Up. I was like, okay, cool. That's awesome. And she's like, I want you to come and speak with me to 900 plus kids. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? It was like an ironic conversation because I just had a conversation a week prior to this saying that I was petrified of that. So I was like, okay, this is obviously life testing me. This is obviously life saying, here's some lemons, make some lemonade, or squish them and walk away. So I was like, I had to really dive deep mentally and be like, okay, nothing else is working for me right now. And then this happens. So I was like, this is obviously a sign for me. And I said, you know what? I'll do it. And she knew me since junior high. So she's like, are you sure you can do this? I'm like, I will commit to this 100%. So I committed. I booked the date and everything. I had it for work and I had it all ready to go. And then as it came closer to the day, I started getting more anxiety and more anxiety. And then I remembered learning something in rehab, which was called mental rehearsal, which is the ability to close your eyes for 30 minutes a day and just physically rehearse in your mind everything you need to do for a certain activity. So, for example, when I teach mental rehearsal, I always use basketball as an example, where you sit down for 30 minutes, you close your eyes, and you just visualize yourself bouncing the ball. You visualize yourself shooting the ball. And what happens is it's actually training your body to have muscle memory. So when you go to do the action, it seems very natural because your brain has been trained to do it. So just to give you more context, there was a research done where they had two groups. They had Group A and Group B. Group A would physically lift a dumbbell and curl it for
Mm.
3 weeks straight. Group B would not have a dumbbell, but they would visualize and mentally rehearse lifting the dumbbell for 3 weeks. And what they found was at the end of the 3 weeks, Group A, which were the group that was physically lifting the dumbbells, had a 33% increase in muscle mass, which is awesome. But Group B, which only mentally rehearsed and did not physically lift the dumbbell, had a 22% muscle mass increase. And they're
Oh.
like, that's crazy. And then I saw Tony Robbins live and he spoke about mental rehearsal. And I was like, oh my God, this is so powerful. So I started using that. I just rehearsed myself every single night for 2 or 3 days. And then when I got to the appearance, it was just second nature for me. And I was like, okay, mental rehearsal is amazing. It's so popular and so powerful that Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and a lot of elite athletes will hire mental health coaches to teach them mental rehearsal. That's how powerful it really is. So when I got complete with the mental rehearsal and practicing within the mind, we arrived to the speaking appearance. I killed it. It was an 8-hour day. And I was like, I fell in love. It was such an adrenaline rush. The best part that solidified this for me was after we were done speaking, a group of girls came up. One of them was crying and saying how our stories of overcoming bullying, depression, and so forth, and suicidal ideation, it helped her realize that she wasn't the only one. And I was like, this is more powerful than any pro wrestling dream I ever had or any policing dream I ever had because this was direct influence. Like I was able to influence this young child directly in person. And I was like, this is the best experience ever. So I just pursued it. In regards to mentorship, that was completely by accident too. I was doing a podcast appearance, something like this one, and the host invited on a young girl to come share her story with bullying. And then after she was done sharing, he asked me to give her advice of how I overcame things like that. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I gave advice, and because of how receptive she was, she became my first mentee. And to this day, we're still best friends. I'm actually going to her wedding next year,
Mm.
if traveling is still allowed, of course, given the current situation we're in. But like we're still really good friends. And then after helping her, I just said, you know what? I'm going to pursue this 100% with no plan B because I don't ever do plan Bs, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to pursue this hardcore. So ever since 2012, that's what I've been doing. And I mentored over 30 youth, and I'm very close to all the families, and we're constantly in conversation. And then about 9 months ago now, I believe about 9 months ago, I announced that I'm going to be stopping it because what happened was when you're mentoring youth and they're sharing their story of depression and suicidal ideation and what they're going through, because I'm an empath, I feel all of it and I carry it on my shoulders. So what was happening was I was neglecting my own mental health in response to helping these kids, and then my mental health started to obviously deteriorate day by day. And then it got to the point where I was seeing my neurologist twice, I was seeing specialists, and I was like, oh my goodness, my mental health is not good. So that's why I stopped doing it. And I carried the name Hero Mentor because one of the kids I was mentoring, we were talking in a session, and he's like, you are like the hero mentor and you help us find our heroes. And it just stuck with me. And I can understand how it could be seen as false advertising in a way because people see, oh, the hero mentor is here. Like every time I went to a new stream on Twitch, it was the same reaction of, oh, hey, are you going to mentor me to become a hero? I was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah, like it's a
this
bit
is
sort
frustrating.
of,
I'm
yeah, oh
like,
God. Yeah.
so I found myself constantly giving my story, and I'm like, I gotta stop doing this because it's getting annoying to constantly like tell my story of how the name came to be. So now I put it in all my branding where it's like former youth hero mentor
Yeah.
of 9 years. So that way they know, oh, okay. I understand it's very confusing, but it's also a name that's very sentimental to me because a youth basically gave me the moniker, or in wrestling terms, the gimmick. So I was like, I love it. But it was definitely a result of me overcoming probably the hardest time of my life because um, I'm gonna be graphic here, but it's very important. I share this part. When I did strongly consider committing, it was such a heroic evolution for me because I remember I don't drink. I don't like alcohol. I've never been a drinker, but I was so depressed and I was so lost. And I had this mindset of, you know what? Maybe it's time that I leave and just be at peace because my entire life at this point, from birth to I believe I was 25, was just nonstop struggling with ADHD. My first concussion was when I was 4 years old, and it was so bad that I popped blood vessels in the right side of my head. So I was constantly dealing with my mom leaving when I was 4 years old. My mom left me for 14 years. So I grew up just feeling worthless. I dealt with bullying to the point that in grade six, two males held me down while a third threw razor blades and rocks at my face. So like my whole life was just constant struggle. And I was like, you know what, I'm done. But I remember I had the pills, and I'm petrified of taking pills. And I had the alcohol, which I'm not a drinker, and I was like, okay, this is how desperate I am to leave. And I remember I poured the pills in my hand. I cracked open the beer, but then my son, he was with his mother at the time. I had a visualization of him laughing and smiling, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm like, I cannot hurt my son this way and have him feeling that he lost me and him thinking that it was his fault somehow. Like I
Mm.
thought it was my fault that my mom left me. So I was like, I cannot do this. And I remember I just broke down crying in the bathroom floor, and I was like, you know what? I'm in rehab. I'm going to go to rehab with a different mindset. And that mindset, like I said, was not recovering to where I was, but becoming a even better person. And I was like, unknowingly, my son knows about the story now because he's old enough. So I told him, but before he didn't know that he was the one that saved my life. And I tell people all the time that becoming a father was the best thing for me in 2008 because from 2006 to 2011, I felt like I had no purpose. But when I became a father in 2008, it's like, okay, this is my purpose right here to be a father. And I was like, you know what? I openly admit I failed at everything else I strive for, but the one thing I will never fail at, and I will constantly work out getting better, is being a father. So I was like, my kids are always what I speak about because it's like when I have my daily struggles, they're the ones I go to. Or my
Mm.
fiance, I'll say, like they all know, like, okay, daddy's having a rough day. Let's go give him a hug. And it's like that 30-second hug just does so much. It's like, okay, I still have worth. I still have value. My family still loves me, even though sometimes I hate myself. Their love for me is like what helps me overcome so much.
Mm.
And then that leads into the Avengers community as well, where it's like I shared a tweet a couple weeks ago, I think it was, or a week ago, where I was like, this community has helps me through so much because there's times before I go streaming live, which I haven't done in almost 2 weeks now because I've taken a break. But before I go live, it's like, okay, I might have an episode flare up. I'm like, okay, you know what? Just look forward to, Suki or Carrot Scraps or FK or Cap Stormbreaker or FBI. Like there's so many amazing content creators in this community that I look forward to engaging with
Mm.
that in itself pushes me to go live, even though I may not feel like it. But it's like working out. If you work out for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, your body releases endorphins that push you through, which means that you will carry that workout on longer. So it's the same thing with streaming. It's like, okay, Dave, just go stream for 5 minutes and see how you feel. And then within 5 minutes, I'm all hyped and ready to go. So it's like this community has helped me so much, and Marvel has helped me so much because I found myself so relatable to a lot of characters like the Hulk. I've always had struggles with self-regulation, which is the ability to control and understand my emotions. So I spent a majority of my life being Hulk, but then when I went to rehab, I learned how to be more Banner and less
Mm.
Hulk. And I was like, I love this. So to go backwards to my speaking appearance, when I started speaking, I noticed that there was a trend within the kids in the audience, and that trend was there was a lot of superhero shirts, a lot of superhero merch, and I was like, okay, I see what's happening here. These kids are like me. They're finding a lot of inspiration from fictional characters that have such emotional attachment with them. So that's when I realized I had to construct my speaking around superheroes. And that's how it all started with the whole hero mentor and superhero focus was not only from my passion for Marvel and superheroes, but I realized a lot of the kids in the audience had the exact same passion. So I was like, you know what? There's a good chance I won't be able to um, influence every single one of these kids, but I will be damned if I don't influence the ones that are wearing the superhero shirts with my story. So I incorporate the Hulk, I incorporate Spider-Man, and I incorporate Batman into my speaking appearances all the time because, like I said, self-regulation is with the Hulk. With Spider-Man, it's the ability to overcome bullying because Peter Parker in high school was bullied a lot by Flash.
Mm.
And a lot of kids, they resonate with that. And then Batman is all about overcoming fears because of his fear of bats
Yeah.
and all of his mental health issues with watching his parents get killed. So it's like those three characters I find are the most relatable. So I make sure I always have their stories intertwined with mine. And that's basically the short story of the long version of how I became a motivational speaker, a mentor, and how I slowly brought the branding to Twitch because what happened was I was losing so much speaking appearances, so much podcast appearances, and so much money because of COVID. And I was like, I really miss public speaking. I really miss talking to kids. And I was like, you know what? Why am I not on Twitch? Why am I not finding a niche that I'm really passionate about and not only bringing awareness to that niche like the Avengers, but incorporating my branding within that niche and that community? And that's slowly where the attraction that was so organic came with Avengers. So what I did was I spent 3 weeks just visiting people's streams and just building that network until I went live for the first time, and I realized, okay, this is my void filler until I can start speaking to kids publicly in person. And it was just such a natural attraction.
Mm. I can see that's the beauty of it as well, is like intertwining superheroes into your public speaking. Because, say for example, youths are not made to go to one of your public speakings, but it's kind of one of them things where they're not too sure, like, is it going to be for them? But as soon as you mention Spider-Man, their heads will go, oh, wait, what? Like, and then it's just that, it's that sort of thing of like, oh, Batman, whoa, hang on, wait, step back, and then all of a sudden they're into it because you've clicked onto something in their brain that they enjoy. So I used to be, I'll be honest, very much a, this ain't gonna work kind of person. You know what I mean? Like, very much. But if, say I went to one of your public speakings, I would have gone in with the mentality of, I'll give it a chance, I'm not, But then as soon as you mention, like, the Spider-Man connection, the Hulk connection, the Batman, I would have gone, oh, wow, okay. This guy's talking my language, So, therefore, I would be, like, into it, there would be some sort of connection there straight away. So I can totally, that's sort of, it's such a sort of simple thing, but it's something that you don't see very often in a lot of sort of different therapies and so on. Like, for example, I went to CAMS here in the UK. I don't know if it's called something different now. If it is, I apologize. But when I went, it was called CAMS. And it's essentially like, just simple therapy. But the problem is I always felt like my therapists were there because it was their job to be there, rather than be a friend,
Mm-hmm.
rather than listen, rather than give me techniques that will benefit me. It felt like they were giving me techniques that just branched to everyone. So my apologies for that. Lenovo just decided to tell me to do a scan. When see, bad luck all day today. When so for example, we'll put a CD on, play some rainforest sort of music and close your eyes. I was like, this is not. No, I don't want to do that. Like, but you give it a try, but it's just kind of like you've already shut down because you just. Sometimes you do know yourself, and it's one of those things where it's kind of like I don't feel like you're taking me seriously. So if I went to like a public speaker such as yourself, and even though you're talking to everyone, the slight mention of Spider-Man, for example, because he's my favorite hero, that would click, and I'd be like, "Whoa, okay, I'm in the room," and I think that's important, and I think that that connections such as that, which a lot of people, especially youths, would love superheroes. It's sort of you'd imagine so, 75% at least. So the chances of you connecting with at least someone in that room is almost a guarantee. And I think
Totally. Like there's so much correlation between psychology and comics. Like the number one, like one of the main reasons we all love, oh, I shouldn't say we all love, but one of the reasons why gamers love playing games is because it gives you an opportunity to just imagine you're this character that you're playing, or to imagine that you're involved in the story directly. So it's not really escapism, but it really is in a way as well, because you're able to just escape your day to day and just use your imagination. And that's one thing that I talk to kids about all the time is trying to help them grow up and never lose their imagination, because a lot of research is finding that the part of your brain that's activated while you're daydreaming strengthens empathy. And this is why they're saying that there's a large lack of empathy in society, because people don't daydream no more. Now it's like, oh, hey, I'm bored, I'm gonna go to my cell phone. Or hey, I'm bored, I'm gonna go on Netflix. It's no longer, hey, I'm bored, but I'm gonna go and meditate, or just go and daydream for 10, 15 minutes. Like specifically me, I was conditioned growing up, do not daydream. It makes you look lazy, but it's like they don't realize that daydreaming is actually extremely healthy for you. It's activating parts of your brain that are not being activated daily. So you're not building your brain up, you're not strengthening it. So you have to daydream. Like I tell my kid all the time who has ADHD as well, I was like, if you're daydreaming, son, I encourage it. Just don't make it like a habit where you're doing it every 25 minutes, because then that's too much. But you have to daydream. And we've conditioned, and we're still conditioning these kids that daydreaming is wrong. It's lazy. It's distracting you. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes we want to be distracted from the real world because the real world is burning us out.
mm,
So I don't blame people for being air quote distracted and daydreaming, because honestly, sometimes society can be a real pain in the AWS, where it's just like, I am stressed, I'm burnt out, I want to escape. And I'm like, okay, the escapism is healthy to a degree, but if you're only relying on escapism, that also means you're not confronting any of the problems that you need to find that heroic evolution. Because I had a youth ask me one time at a school appearance, he's like, would you change anything in your past? I said, the only thing I would change in my past is how I perceived it when I was in the present. That is it. Because all of my negative experiences have helped me find my heroic evolutions, where it's like I found the strength, I found the resilience, the grit, the determination to overcome. And I had another youth ask me what was the driving force for me. And I said, hope. I know this sounds so Superman-esque because it's so true, but as long as you have hope, you have reason. As long as you have hope, you have the ability to foresee that I will overcome this. And believe it or not, one of the most powerful statements anyone can say is, I'm going through insert problem here. People usually tend to say that as in a way that they're complaining, or they're trying to express how they're feeling, but they don't understand that when you say the words I'm going through, you're actively realizing you have a problem, and B, you're pushing through it. So I always tell people all the time, I'm like, say you're going through something, because that means you're actively pushing through it, as opposed to say I'm quitting, or I'm stopping, I'm giving up. Just when you realize how powerful the quote is, I'm going through, and how it helps you, it just once you understand the vocabulary and the power of words that these words have, you'll actually start to reverse engineer your mindset and realize that, oh my God, internal vocabulary is everything. So I always call it the if versus what mindset, or when, sorry, if versus when, where you can say Stardust can say something like, if only I can live my dream. If you change that sentence to when I live my dream, it gives you so much more motivation because you have the hope and you have the belief. And it's like I said on Twitter, believability influences ability. The more you believe, the more you'll commit. And I had to learn all these lessons the hard way, and that's why I tell kids and their families when I was doing mentorship, any piece of advice I give you is the advice I've lived. Otherwise, I'm just talking to sound fancy. And to jump on your point about counseling and therapy, I totally understand it because when I was seeing counseling when I was younger, it bored me because I thought it was just copy and paste conversation. Like the conversation he's having with me, he just had with a girl or a boy before me.
Mm.
And I was like, this isn't it's not impactful for me. And then I did a lot of research about psychology and youth psychology and adult psychology are dramatically different because we all think differently. For example, youths don't think of, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. This person knows all the fancy words. They think of, this person is just trying to sound good to me. This person doesn't understand me. So when I started doing mentorship, I was like, listen, I'm going to start sharing my story and build that relatability with you. And then maybe then you can have that emotional connection. And I found that when I shared my battles and my current battles, the kids were like, oh, wow, you understand me. And I was like, that those are the most powerful words that any kid could hear is, I understand you. Because it's like a lot of adults go to kids and they say, well, when I was your age, yada, yada, yada. Or when I was, it's like, it's completely dismissive of what the kid's going through, where it's like, they don't care what you went through. They don't care what you did because it sounds braggadocious, right? It sounds like you're just saying, well, I did this and it worked for me. And it's like, well, unfortunately, most advice that's given is not universal. And that's why I learned in mentorship, it's case by case, where I might have a kid who's neurodivergent, and then the next kid could be neurotypical. Well, the advice I gave to the kid who's neurodivergent may not work for the kid who's neurotypical because they think differently, they react differently. And that's why you probably felt this the way you did going to counseling. You're just like, this isn't effective to me. It feels like I'm seeing a teacher, I'm seeing a lecturer,
Mm.
where what you wanted and what you needed was someone that you can relate to. And that's where superheroes come in for a lot of kids. That's why a lot of kids will ignore their parents, but if they watch an episode of Spider-Man and Spider-Man gives a life lesson, which he does in the cartoon series Ultimate Spider-Man, like every episode has a lesson to it, that child will probably be a lot more receptive to that Spider-Man episode than he would his parents. It's because of how his parents are communicating to the child, where they're like, well, I did this, or my favorite is back in my day, we walked up and down the hill with no socks and no shoes. I'm like, well, that's, I'm sorry that you guys had no socks and no shoes, but I have those. So, like, why would I find your struggles relatable to me? And so, my biggest advice in regards to mentorship, coaching, is it's all about relatability and helping that child or that client, given your, the ages you're working with, is just help them be relatable to what you went through, but in a sense where they sit there and say, this person's bragging to me, but in a sense where they're like, he understands me or she gets me. And that is huge for anyone. Like if you came to me, Stardust, one day saying, hey, Hero, I need to talk. I'm like, all right, cool, let's begin. And you tell me what's going on. I would never say, yeah, you know what? I've been there before. This is how I did with it. Because that's called sympathy. But empathy is where I understand what you're going through and I make it about you, where it's like, you know what? I've been there.
Mm.
What do you need from me right now? What can I do to help you right now? Because what you're going through is extremely brutal. And we have a huge issue within society right now where people are dismissing other people's problems because they have their own they're not dealing with, so they're overwhelmed. And that's why a lot of people don't, it's not that they don't care about you, it's just that they don't have enough mental capacity to care about you because they're going through their own struggles. And it's like, holy cow, like the whole world, the whole society as a whole is just struggling because we're all focused on the wrong things. We're focused on materials. We're focused on blaming other people. We're focused on expecting other people to make us happy, which I always feel is the biggest mistake. As soon as you try to find someone that makes you happy, and then you keep that expectation on them, it's like that's not healthy because you're not having any internal growth. And so when I see people say all the time, "Oh, I love my fiance because he or she makes me happy," I'm like, that's not healthy. That is 1% not healthy. That it's awesome that they influence your happiness, but they should not be in charge of it. So there's like a lot of mental changes that people need to make before they realize, oh, this is how my life is supposed to be. I'm just
Mm.
supposed to just experience life, not one of the things I teach kids all the time is to help lower their anxiety is lower your expectations because every expectation you have takes a source of your energy. So like let's say for example today you say, "Oh, I expected Hero to be on time today." Well, now you're dealing with that anger, that frustration. But if you say, "Oh, you know what, he's running a little bit late, whatever, life happens," you just feel less stress and less anxiety. Like when you had all your technical issues, I could have been like, "Hey, Stardust, I'm ready. Where are you?" But I was like, "Hey, I'm ready when you are, buddy." Because I'm just like, I'm not expecting anything. So I just go with the flow and say, "Hey, if Stardust cancels on me, cool, I adapt." And it's just like everyone has all these expectations with every person. I expect this person to say sorry. I expect this person to say they love me. I expect this person to do this, do that. Like it's just whoa, lower your expectations. And that goes into touching with Marvel's Avengers, where people say to me sometimes in private messages, "Hey, Hero, you're so calm with this game while I'm so frustrated." It's like, yeah, I lower my expectations. I'm not in control of Crystal Dynamics. I'm not in control of Square Enix. I literally don't have the ability to go make these changes, so I just wait because I have so much more in my life that I'm stressing about already. Like, why would I want to increase my stress load with something I have no control over? And that's why you see me avoiding all those debates and conversations about changes and whatnot, unless I'm invited to like a environment like this podcast where it's like you directly ask me a question about Avengers, then
Mm.
I'll answer it. But in regards to social media, it's like I want no part of the debates. I want no parts of the arguments because they honestly serve me no purpose. Like it's just lower your expectations, people. Focus on what you can control and just love those around you and just focus on being in that happy place as much as you can be because this morning you had a lot of technical issues and I'm going to tell you why I feel that happened. So when the first issue happened, and because maybe you felt rushed or maybe you felt like anxious, what you did was it's called learn helplessness. It's where you realize anything that comes to you that's good is going to go bad eventually. And a lot of people deal with that because that's how society usually is with people. Like, oh yeah, I had a great sleep, but I spilt my eggs or I spilt my coffee, and I
Mm.
also call it the stub toe. I also call it the stub toe theory. So you wake up in the morning, you had a great sleep, and you stub your toe. Now you have two choices. One, that stub toe becomes your total focus the whole day. Where you're like, my whole day started off with a stub toe. My whole day is ruined. Everything is going bad. And now you're gravitating and pulling in negativity. And guess what? What you think is what you manifest. So because of that stub toe, you're thinking your whole day is ruined. That's the result you're going to get. However, on the flip side, if you say, you know what, I stubbed my toe, I overcame it, I moved past it. Now you're in a level-headed, you're grounded, and you're still in a positive mindset. So when you had the battery issue and you're like, oh my goodness, my whole day is ruined, I'm rushing, I'm stressed out, and then you tripped over your cord, and like it just added to your plate of stress and frustration. And what happens is you can end up staying in that mindset the whole day, and anything that goes right will be met with two things that go wrong. So it's like it's the stub toe. You can either stub your toe and overcome it and move on, or stub your toe and think, "This is my whole day. This is my entire life." And unfortunately, um, a person I follow named Dr. Joe Dispenza, he put out an article that said that we spend over 70% of our life in fight or flight mode. 70% of our life is in stress mode. And I'm like, that's scary. That's why we're having increase of cancer, depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, and so many other illnesses because we're living most of our life, over half of it, in stress mode. And I'm like, that's scary. So when I became a mentor and a speaker, that was my goal, was to help people lower that expectation, lower that statistic, and just be like, guys, like, let's make passion our purpose. Like, it's hard because of bills and responsibilities, but it's even harder if you don't take your time off to invest in yourself. So like you go, you do your 8 hours of job, but then as soon as you punch out of your job, you're like, okay, now it's me time. Now it's me to build that fashion designing dream or that acting dream or whatever it is that you have. You know, you have to make sure that you put the effort in, because the only thing that we're all in control of is our amount of effort. That's it. Like that's what we control, is our effort. How much effort are you putting into your dreams? Is it enough? One of the questions I was asked by a mentor of mine was, if you were able to put an hourly wage on your current work ethic, how high would you pay yourself? And I was like, damn, that's deep. Like, am I worth 15 bucks an hour right now? Am I worth 20 bucks an hour? Like, how much would I pay myself for how much I'm working towards my dreams? And a
Mm.
lot of the kids I asked that question to, they're like, oof, not even $2 an hour. I'm like, there, that's the problem. You're not working, um, you're not investing in yourself enough. And that's the problem that we're having nowadays, is everyone's so invested in their job because they want that pay raise or that promotion. But then again, that's not even guaranteed. I can tell you numerous times in my working career, working for someone else, where I worked so hard. Like I missed my son's first birthday. I missed my wedding anniversary 3 years in a row because I was so focused on moving up that corporate ladder, and it never happened. And then I learned that it's just, you're only in control of your effort. That is it. I'm not in control of my boss promoting me. So I lower that expectation. I say, you know what? I'm just going to work hard and do what I love to do. And because, it takes more than working hard. Like, people work hard, but they still struggle because it's a lot more than just working hard. There's also working smart. I didn't work smart for so long. So I had battled chronic pain for 15 plus years, and shoulders and neck injuries and back injuries, obviously with the inclusion of pro wrestling and security and bodyguard work, but
Yeah,
that didn't help.
that's not.
But
Yeah, I
it
was gonna
definitely,
say.
but wrestling, oh my gosh, that was my first love. When I was 4 years old, my father befriended a guy named Kenny Johnson who wrestled for Stampede Wrestling. And if it wasn't for that friendship with my father, I never would have probably fallen in love with wrestling. So what happened was, when we were friends with Kenny and another wrestler named Steve Rivers, who's a really good friend of mine as well, who he just celebrated his 30th anniversary in wrestling last week. So he's friends with Jericho and a whole bunch of other people. Great guy, but if it wasn't for them and our friendship with them, I would have never fallen in love with wrestling. My first ever live wrestling event with WWF was a TV taping here in Calgary, Alberta, in 1991, where it had Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Ted DiBiase, Iron Sheik, and so many more legends. And Steve made his wrestling debut on the card, and my buddy Kenny worked the card as well. And that was back in the day when WWF allowed you backstage. So I was backstage with Hogan, Warrior, and everybody. And then when I saw Warrior's entrance live, I was like, that was my surge, where I was like, oh my God, that was amazing. And I was only 5 years old, 6 years old.
That's
And
crazy.
that's when it was so surreal how I never talked about wrestling before. But then my dad got, made this friend. We started going to Stampede Wrestling shows. We started going to Rocky Mountain House Wrestling, or sorry, Canadian, I can't remember the promotion's name. My buddy Tyson Kidd will definitely know it, but I can't remember the name. Canadian Rocky Mountain Wrestling. We used to go to that show every Friday night here in Calgary, and that's where I met Chris Jericho and Lance Storm. And it was just like my childhood was automatically just out of nowhere surrounded by professional wrestling. I was going to the wrestling shows, I was going backstage, I was in the ring before the show wrestling with Jason the Terrible, which I don't know if you know him that well, but he's a huge legend in Stampede Wrestling, and he was also a legend in Japan for his hardcore style. But he was like 6'8", and he was like power slamming me and body slamming me when I was like 7, 6 years old, and I just fell in love with the industry so much Then I started going to a gym called BJ's Gym here in Calgary, which is no longer with us. The city bought it, so they demolished it. But BJ's Gym is where Bret Hart, Owen Hart, British Bulldog, Dynamite Kid, they would all go and train. So when my buddy Kenny would go there sporadically, monthly on the weekends, I would go with him. And that's how I became friends with Matthew Annis, and that's how I met TJ Wilson, aka Tyson Kidd, and Harry Smith, and Teddy Hart. And I became very close friends with Matthew because we were around the same age of, no, he was 3 years older than me. Sorry, he was 3 years older than me, but he was teaching me how to do drop kicks, and we would always just wrestle in the ring while my dad and Kenny were working out.
Hmm.
That's when I met Owen. I so Jesus, this is such a frustrating topic, but it did happen. About 6 months ago, I was being called a fraud and so forth because I was sharing all my memories growing up, and people are like, "Well, we never saw you, and we never met you," and I'm like, "Guys, like." So because you don't know me, because you never met me, everything I'm sharing with you is a lie. And it was such a toxic experience where I was like, you know what, I'm done. Because with all the good things with wrestling, there is a lot of black clouds within the industry too, which you're probably familiar with as
Oh,
well.
I can't wait to go
And
into that.
right, it's just like I was playing with Matthew Annis growing up, and then unfortunately Matthew passed away when he was 13. I was 10, and he passed away of fleshing disease. It happened so fast. It was like 2 weeks, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, where he lost an arm, he lost a leg, and then he passed away. And it was the most heartbreaking experience I had at such a young age. It was my first experience with death, and I stopped going to BJ's gym. So I was only at BJ's gym for 91 to 97 or 96. So I only saw Owen a couple times, and I only saw Davy Boy, British Bulldog, a couple times too. But the one memory I have of British Bulldog that my father remembers and Kenny is it was backstage at a wrestling show. I believe it was Stampede Wrestling, and I was visibly upset. I don't know why. I was a kid, who knows? But Davy Boy put me on his lap, and in his British accent, he said, "You know, life is too short to be sad. Be happy." And he gave me a pair of jeans, and on the jeans was, I believe it was hockey figures or hockey or some sort of sport figure. And that's how I remember Davy Boy. He was always so kind and polite and compassionate. And Owen was the one memory I have of Owen was at BJ's gym where I told Owen I want to be a wrestler. And he's like, no. He's like, promise me you'll graduate high school first and then pursue wrestling. And I kept that promise because when we had Owen's funeral, I didn't go. I stayed and I went to school because I figured that that would be the best way for me to remember him was for me to
Yeah.
go to school and focus on that. And then I graduated high school and then I pursued wrestling when I was 19. But a lot of people were like, well, we never saw you. I'm like, guys, I was only at BJ's gym sporadically every second, third weekend or whatever it was from 91 to 96 or 97. So like the chances of us never seeing each other was very high. Like
Yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
like I get so upset when people try to tell me my life experiences are fake or fraudulent, where it's like, really? Like maybe it's best I didn't meet you because you're a very negative, toxic person. I remember I told one person I was like, I don't make any money on these stories. I don't make any profit at all of sharing my life experiences. They're just what I live through. And I'm like, it's such a toxic environment. I'm not gonna say anyone's names, but if they by any chance listen to this, just be like, you know, just because we never met doesn't mean my life is a fraudulent lie or whatever. And I found that that was probably the hardest part of me in the wrestling industry was just the toxicity and the constant feeling that you had to outdo someone else, or the constant feeling or pressure that you had to be better than someone else. It was so anxiety driven that I was like, you know what? Looking back at my life now, even though it was my dream for 16 years and I chased it for 16 years, I'm actually glad it didn't work out because it led to me finding a part of my life that's genuinely fulfilling. The first person I trained with was a guy named Massive Damage. I traveled to Edmonton, which is about 3 hours driving away from Calgary. Because I don't drive because my concussions, I had to use the bus. So it was like a 5 hour travel, and it was for a weekend seminar. The ring was it was raggedy. It was. I saw both the rings, and I was like, you know what, Massive? I can definitely see why we sign a waiver that says if we die, we cannot sue, or our family cannot sue. I
Yeah.
can see why we're signing this because the ring was atrocious. It was so bad that I actually suffered a severe neck injury off an arm drag because I believe I can't remember if it was my left or my right foot, but one of my feet got stuck in a hole in the
Oh
canvas.
my god.
And when I went to go do the front flip into the arm drag, obviously I couldn't, right? So I
Mm.
landed right on my neck. And obviously, with adrenaline rush, I didn't feel anything until the last day of training, and I was on the bus back to Calgary. I was like, I can't move my neck. I have zero control of my neck. I couldn't hold it up. I couldn't leave it laying down. Like I couldn't do anything. And of course, me being stubborn, I didn't go to the doctors for over a week. And the doctor's like, yeah, you have ligament damage. You have like some. He's like, you did something very bad to your neck. So I took a couple weeks off. I was invited back to Monster Pro Wrestling to train full time and move there to become part of the cruiserweight division, but I declined the offer because that just was not my vision. I didn't want to be a cruiserweight. At the time, I was 211 pounds. I didn't know that within a year, I would go through what I call a Britney Spears growth spurt, where I'd go from 211 pounds to over 240. And I was like, whoa, I went through a massive growth spurt. I was also working out a lot harder and a lot more than I was previously, so that probably played a huge part in it. But it was just a massive growth. So after a couple weeks off, I found out about Bad News Allen, also known as Bad News Brown, had a wrestling school here in Calgary on a native reserve land. I was like, oh, okay, I remember Bad News from Stampede Wrestling. Bad News was also involved in a prolific rivalry with Roddy Piper.
Mm.
Um, so if you saw Bad News Allen, you'd be like, oh, okay, I remember him. He was his finisher was called the Ghetto Blaster. It was an enziguri kick, and so I was like, all right, I'll go check out his school. So I went and checked out his school. It was it was really good priced. So I paid the first month's payment, and then I realized Raj was there and Gama Singh Jr. Raj is now known as Jinder Mahal, and so I trained with Jinder Mahal for 3 months, and Gama Singh Jr., who also is sorry, not TNA, he's an Impact star, part of the Desi Hit Squad. So I trained with them for 3 months, and they were probably one of the best parts of the industry. So compassionate, so kind, so well spoken, and just very driven to help the wrestling business in a positive way. So when Jinder became the world champion in WWE, I was like, oh, he's such a worst champion ever. I'm like, guys, this guy is one of the nicest guys you could ever meet in this industry. He's also one of the hardest working guys you'll ever meet. Like, until you know the person that is portraying that character, I'm like, just keep your mouth shut. Because with all the bad parts in this industry, Jinder was one of the good parts.
I think
And
it
same with
was,
Gama.
yeah, I think it was a shame with Jinder because what ended up happening was rather than a slow climb, so it kind of felt inevitable and like a really good, like, oh, that makes sense, a climb to the summit. It was obviously he was portrayed as, a jobber previously, and then he beats Randy Orton for the WWE title. It was a very much like a, what? When did that? How? Like, and that. I think that's what made it great, but also bad for Jinder because people didn't get a chance to see him as a main eventer, which he can be, totally can. Like, I had no problems with him as WWE champion, but it was just how he came back, beat Randy Orton for the WWE title. So suddenly, after coming back a while back and being like cannon fodder for Finn Balor and other wrestlers like that.
Yeah, it was funny because he just a week before he won the contendership to face Orton, he was rumored to have injured Finn Balor with a concussion.
Yeah, I remember with the forearm.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he's pushed to main event. So everyone's like, "Oh my God, they're pushing him because he hurt someone." And it's like, no, Jinder is, to be honest with you, the guy has a great look. Like he's always like when I was training with him in 2005, he wasn't that ripped. But then I remember I saw him in I think it was 2007 where he signed a developmental deal that and he was just flying to Tampa and he started to look a lot like more built and I was like, dude, you look jacked. Keep it up. He's like, yeah, I'm working hard because I'm going to the B. And I was like, there you go. And then when I saw him debut with Great Khali, I was like, yes. Same thing with Tyson Kidd and David Hart Smith, David Boy Smith Jr. Like when I saw them debut in WWE, I was like, yes, because I saw how hard these guys worked. And same with Natty. Like I remember in 2005, Natty was off with an injury from that she had in Japan. So her and Harry came to BJ's gym when I was training with Tyson, and I got to train with Natty and Harry for the first time in a long time. And I will say one of the best choppers that I've ever been hit by was Davey Boy Smith Jr. That guy's chops, man. Oh my god, I was bleeding after like
Yeah,
4 or 5 of his chops. Like I was bleeding. So I grew up loving chops because chopping was like it was very commonplace for those who wanted to get in the wrestling industry, where it's like you can either take a bunch of body slams or take a bunch of chops, and people would always choose body slams. I don't know why. Like body slams are hit or miss. Like you can have a bad body slam, or you can have a good body slam.
yeah,
It all depends how the person places you, right, and
yeah,
how
for
you
sure.
post.
I
And I'm
was
like Sabu, Sabu refused to take body slams because of how brutal they could be.
I had an advice. I can't remember who it was. It was definitely. I think it was. I actually think it was Bram from TNA. We did it because it was a seminar. He come over, and I remember. By the way, Bram of all people, by the way, a guy who does a lot of hardcore stuff, was like,
Yep.
each bump could be your last. So don't overdo yourself. If you don't have to bump, don't bump. You know what I mean? So obviously, if you could do something just as impactful, so like I can't. It might not even been Bram. I have this image in my head of him saying it. That probably sounds ridiculous, actually, but Bram of all people. But either way, I got some advice from someone who I looked up to. So it must have been someone of who could tell me these things. I go, wow, yep, that makes sense, cool. And it was your last bump. The bump you do could be your last. So, you've only got so many bumps you could do in your entire career. Why use them all getting body slammed 30 times at training? So they would teach very sort of like, yeah, we'll teach you how to bump, but the drills where you're like, you have to bump like 10 times, back bumps, front bumps 10 times and stuff like that. You just found really the sort of ridiculous, because it's like, if you can do it and you're safe, why put that amount of pressure on your body when I can teach you things like how to work the crowd and stuff like that, which makes sense, and I was into that, but I also really liked just the technicality of wrestling itself. So for me, I was very much, my character in wrestling was very much just, blue eye, baby face, sort of, and obviously I was quite young coming in, so I had that for me instantly, right? So you essentially don't need a crazy character, because that got me over, just the baby face. So, working some matches with campy bad guys, that was always fun. Doing face versus face matches with a guy called Robbie X, who was on World of Sport, not the old one, the new one that went on ITV. Um, that was a lot of fun. I was gassed. He was a very, very, very good high flyer, and that was, whew, but working against bigger guys, because at the time, like, I'm like 15, 16, wrestling against a guy called Dale Preston, who plays King Kendo in WAW, which, again, these are all British promotions, so you might not be familiar with it, but WAW is run by the Knight family. So
Okay.
Paige's family from WWE as well. So yeah, so that was all that stuff was always a lot of fun. I loved being able to work different matches and stuff like that. But unfortunately, in fact, I have a funny story about Sabu as well. Actually, it's funny you mentioned Sabu. Um, I think Sabu was going through quite a bad time when he came over to do seminars in the UK, because he was meant to come do a seminar before the show, but apparently on the way to the venue he fell out of his car, and he came in and he was either drunk or really high. So
Hmm.
he had to sleep it off in the changing room, which I mean, I was wrestling for a year. I was in a battle royal with a bunch of people who knew what they were doing. So, it was, and I went to go and get changed, and I was like, oh my god, there's Sabu sleeping just on a line of chairs. Like, this is a guy that, like, if I even startle him, he'll probably just go, and throw a chair at my head or something. So, yeah, no. So then he decided, he woke up, went out there, did a hardcore cage match with thumbtacks, tables, and stuff like it was no one's business. He he made one of the valets cry who came out with the baby faces because she didn't know that she had to take a table spot. She didn't have to actually. Sabu went to her and said, "I'm going to put you through a table." And she wasn't up for that because she was still quite new as well, and I guess because of what happened earlier, it was a bit sort of like, I don't know if I trust you to do something like that. So Sabu, rather than get one of the tables that are obviously designed to put someone through, he went to the merch table, which is not designed to be, broken, right? So he's pulling the table away, throwing all the merchandise, and obviously that's when, like, the promoter had to come out and basically stop him and stuff like that, and it was a real big drama. But obviously people thought it was a part of the show, so everyone was like, EC dub, EC. I was like, guys, no, you're encouraging this, like. But it was, I mean, it did really well. Like, don't get me wrong, it's almost a shame that wasn't staged, because if it was, it would have been genius. Like, because it came off so well. But no, that was an interesting thing with Sabu. But then I got told that a few people in my other wrestling school went to a seminar with him more recently, and he apologized for being like that. So it's. I hold no grudges in that regard, really, with people like that. It's just, it was good for me to see very early on how bad the business can make a person. Not bad, but how affected the business can make someone. Especially a guy like Sabu who's, does pain for laughs.
Yeah.
And that was something I noticed as well. The amount of scars on his body, my word. Like, I was sat because it was like a theater sort of setup almost, but enough room for the ring. And I was sat at the top sort of row, so people couldn't see us because obviously if you see the wrestlers watching, that's a bit awkward. So, but even from up there, I could see all the scars on his body. I was like, my god.
See, like I was never really big in the hardcore stuff because I grew up watching Brett, Owen, and Davey Boy and like the technical side of wrestling. So when I started training and I started thinking, like, and the sad reality with me is I never had a chance to perform in a live crowd because Bad News raised me in the belief of don't rush your training and don't rush your debut. So I was like, okay, I'll train for 9 months or a year and then I'll discuss a possible debut somewhere. But I never got to that because my concussions took me out so fast. Like,
Yeah.
I was training one night, not in an official school environment. What happened was when Bad News School closed down, we still used the facility to train, but it was not like actual training. It was like just going in and just hitting some bumps and practicing some spots. And I was taking a heart attack, double team maneuver, and I got stiff clothesline. The guy's palms smoked my temple, which knocked me for a loop. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And then I took a DT like minutes later, and I spiked myself because I was not okay. So I got 2 concussions in a span of a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And so I had to take about a month. I took about 3 weeks off of that. Then my third concussion was a goofy one where my best friend Jess and I we were by ourselves in the ring, and I was like, I'm going to try a flipping senton over the top rope to the crash mat on the floor. Oh, geez.
Oh no. Oh no.
I don't have much. Obviously, I don't have much memory of it because I got severely concussed from it. But my buddy Jesse is like, when you went over the top rope, he's like, you didn't let go. And I forgot. I have a fear of heights. So I'm guessing when I was doing the rotation and I was holding the, I had my left hand under grip, my right hand over grip, as that's how we were taught. But I didn't release my hands. So Jesse's like, when I did the rotation, he's like, you made good height, but your distance was really short, so I went right head first on the apron.
Oh God.
And I remember nothing of it, but he's like, I saw it. He's like, you were so dazed. He's like, your pupils were so huge, and you're like, I'm. And he's like, you're like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm
The
like, I clearly was not okay. Um, so I said at that moment, like, you know what? If I come back to wrestling, I'm going to be focused on a. I was huge with catch can wrestling, huge with catch wrestling. I've always loved that style of just grappling and submission work. And what intensified that patch for me was when I was doing security work and I was studying so many different types of self defense, it was all grapple oriented. Because, when I'm going for an arrest, I want to have control of the person's body and arm bars and arm locks and wrist locks. So I was like, I was studying so much into pressure points and submission wrestling that I just fell in love with it so much. And when I lost my wrestling dream was I remember my last day training was January 17th, 2006. And it was a Tuesday. The following Sunday was my 20th birthday, January 22nd, 2006. And I was waiting for my now ex-wife in a well-lit part of one of our, it's not really a ghetto, but it's like a really well recognized area for crime. It was also across the street from where I worked at as security officer. So I was like, I knew what to expect. And my memory is very hit or miss with the situation. But what I do remember is I remember seeing three drunk guys with a shovel walking past me to their house, and they were jaggering at me, and I was like, guys, I don't know who you are. And then like minutes later, two of the three came back carrying the shovel and a large glass mug, and I was like, oh no. I had this intuition that something bad was going to happen, and it did. So all I remember was the guy yelled at me saying, "Why didn't you say hi to me?" And I said, "I don't know who the f you are. Leave me alone." And I remember I got smacked in the face with the glass mug, and my lip was so like Donald Duck. It was so swollen. And then I remember turning around to run towards my ex-wife's family's house, and I remember getting hit in the head with a shovel once, and then getting hit two more times in the head. And then after that, I remember nothing. I remember that I slowly remember going to the hospital, my dad being there, and then I remember the doctors saying I suffered my 12th concussion, and I remember him saying that he will not clear me for wrestling no more. And I was like, my wrestling dream was like literally robbed from me at that moment. And then that was around the time that TJ, Harry, and Natty were beginning conversations with the WWE, and I was like, I was jealous of them, but not in a way where it was like a negative jealousy. It was like, dude, I just had my dream stolen from me, and now I'm seeing you guys living it. So I was very happy for them, but I was very internally broken, where it's like my dream just got stolen from me, and I had no idea what else to do with my life because that was all I chased. So I battled suicidal ideation. I remember I told my best friend Charmaine, I was like, you know what, I'm going to commit. And she's like, the hell you are. And it was 2 or 3 years of me battling not being able to do that dream no more. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I can get back in the industry in regards to like writing or coaching or something. So I tried that, but I found that no matter what year I would go back into wrestling, it just felt like the same drama every single time. Just people talking about other people fighting other people, and people trying to be better than other people. And I'm just like, you know what? I can't handle this toxicity no more.
yeah.
And I was doing a coaching gig last year, and that's why I said when COVID hit, I lost a lot of opportunities because I was coaching submission wrestling and self defense for a local wrestling school. But there was just so much drama in regards to a lot of people involved that I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm like, I'm getting no return on investment from wrestling. It's just constantly a stressor for me. So I left the industry, and then that's when that whole situation happened where I made a status. Someone shared the status, and then all these people were like, "Dave's a fraud. He's always lying." I'm like, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
So I was like, "You know what? I'm like, I'm done." I was like, and that's when I told you about legacy over ego, right? Because I was chasing ego in wrestling. I wanted to be known in wrestling. I want to be respected. But I was like, you know what? In regards to my legacy, it literally has no benefit for me whatsoever. So that's why I left the industry completely. I was just like, I was grossed out. I was frustrated. And I was like, you know what? To anyone else that's in the industry, best of luck to you. However, for my mental health, this was after I saw my neurologist twice and being put on a watch list for CTE. I was like, I cannot be around this no more. So I will always love wrestling, but I haven't watched a product currently in over 6 months. It's like I completely tapped out. And the
For
only
sure.
wrestling I watch nowadays, like the only wrestling I watch nowadays is my buddies and I do a podcast where we review all the old pay-per-views in chronological order. So the only wrestling I watch now is on the WWE network for the old school wrestling because I will always appreciate the old school wrestling mentality of go out there and wrestle, not this high flying 630s, double rotation moonsaults, hurricanes from the top rope to the outside. I'm like, no, that's not my style. And that style, I will always believe, shortens your career as opposed to making it longer. So I have a lot of old school mentality towards the business that a lot of people didn't really respect or understand because it doesn't fit the narrative of current mentality in wrestling of high
Mm.
flying and cheap pops. I'm like, no. So overall, like if you said, Hero, what's your favorite wrestler right now? I was like, I don't have any because I legit tapped right out 6 months ago. I was like, it was such a bad experience and a reminder of what I saw growing up. Like I remember I saw my buddy taking steroids. I saw the needle go into his rear end and I was like, whoa. I was like 7 at the time, maybe 8. And I was like, okay, I am never doing that.
Yeah,
And
that's
I was offered steroids so many times in the industry from people in the industry that I was like, okay, this is annoying. Like I don't need steroids. My family are known to be big, muscular people. And that's why I said I went from 211 pounds to 240 pounds within a year. I just went through a huge growth spurt. I call it the Britney Spears growth spurt because people were like, "Oh my God, Britney Spears grew so fast in the chest region," and they couldn't explain it. So that's why I call it the Britney Spears growth. Whereas, like, I could not explain how it is I gained so much muscle mass and weight in a short time. They're like, "You're using steroids." I'm like, dude, I will never use steroids. I've never smoked. I have never tried marijuana. I don't like drinking. So why would I go and take steroids when I know what happens with people like David Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid? It's like, why would
yeah.
I do that? Like I've seen it. I've seen what happens. I've seen the way that it breaks your body down. Now that's not saying that steroids are all bad because there are controllable steroid use. Like for example, if you have asthma that's really bad, you use a steroid inhaler. So that's why they call them performance enhancement drugs because there's a lot of steroids that people do need to take. Like my buddy Davey Boy Smith Jr. He violated the WWE wellness policy because he was taking steroids, but the steroids he was taking was helping his recovery from an injury. And they're like, oh, so it wasn't like the performance enhancing steroid; it was one to help you recover through an injury.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different discussion about wrestling and steroids because there's a lot of discussion there,
Well,
like like massive discussion.
there is a lot of drug use in the industry. I literally cannot name names because these people work in New Japan Pro Wrestling at the moment. But but let's just say that there was a lot of cocaine use in the industry,
Oh yeah,
especially in British wrestling as well. Whew, like the amount of things that I've heard slash seen slash just been around and so on. It's quite traumatic being really young, being backstage at a wrestling show. I'm not saying like being backstage at a wrestling show is like going to a strip club with drugs everywhere, right? It's not like that. But if you sort of think, if you're a bit more self-aware of what's going on, like you've had a couple of matches, so you don't need to like be crapping yourself all day, so you're sort of a bit more self-aware of the changing room and stuff, you'll notice a lot of people have some strange conversations. Like you'll notice that there's
yep,
a lot of shadier people you've trained with acting all weird. So I will give an example because I can't imagine those people would watch it, but I went through a really awkward situation in my wrestling career where me and my ex, who were wrestling at the time, we had split up. Yeah, just for reasons, and there was no hard feelings. We still respected each other as pro wrestlers, and we still were friends. So it was whatever. However, I was put in a really awkward situation because she was wrestling in an intergender match with someone who was basically stealing the Joey Ryan gimmick. Obviously, Joey Ryan's, we found out he's a
Ugh.
terrible, terrible human
Uh,
being. But my point is, he was
to no
trying to,
surprise.
no surprise, right? I mean, get the gimmick times 10 is what I always heard, and that seems to be the case there. But anyway, yeah. So this guy was basically like, minor Joey Ryan style, and he wanted to do things like obviously booplexes and stuff like that. And the reason I was so against it was because it was a kids show. There were kids in the audience, and
Oh,
and the
jeez.
only way that match would work is if you do that and she beats the living shit out of you to make a point. If that's the statement you want to make, she has to hit you really, really hard. You know what I mean? Or just don't do it. You know what I mean? Like, if her shots don't look convincing or she doesn't actually hurt you for real, it will fall on its face and it will be so uncomfortable. But obviously, I got accused of being jealous, right? Because, of course, whatever. But, so I watched the match. I thought, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Why not? And I watched it and it was exactly as I feared. A lot of bum grabbing, a lot of boob grabbing, and her shots were terrible. So, and he won. He won the match. I'm like, so okay, so a bunch of kids now know it's okay to grope women. Brilliant. And that was the impression that match gave. And I was like, and backstage, I really made a fuss out of it because I thought that is disgusting. Like, I don't care if that's your gimmick. Tone it down in front of kids. You can be a ladies' man without having to, essentially R-word someone, right? Like, that's horrible. And it was just one of them situations where it was, everyone was looking at me like I'm the weirdo. I'm like, why is this normal? Why are we condoning this sort of gimmick if it's not being done properly? Because there are gimmicks in the industry that work that some people think, I don't know about that one. But you have to do it well, and you have to respect the audiences you're in front of. So, for example, I had a friend called the Cougar Kid who used to flirt with older women. he worked he worked really well on over 18 shows because of course he did, right? Obviously he'd always get his
Yep.
comeuppance because the GM of the promotion was an older lady, so she would smack him, people would cheer. It was good. He always got his comeuppance. He was just an idiot. There was no weird grabbing. It was just flirting with, it's just older ladies. So with when you go to that sort of gimmick where it's just a bunch of kids watching on it, it's like, that's so gross. Like, and and there's loads of instances where people were, so essentially I left because of a lot of backstage politics. Because for example, I did a seminar with Magnus, Nick Aldis, and he
Yep.
he, he loved me.
Great guy.
He loved me, and honestly, I was so thrilled about that because I can't help it but want to impress big names at seminars. I just can't. It's a thing
That's
that
natural.
yeah. So I literally, like, by the end of it, I want them to recognize me because he was wrestling on the card. We didn't know he was against, so I was like, I'm getting that match. Like, I am going to wrestle Magnus, and he was, so he basically, because people were taking hip tosses really weird, he thought, oh, you've been doing really well, let's go. And I took his hip toss, and because I wanted to impress him that much, he didn't have to, take me over. I just yeeted myself. Like, I was like, it literally was the most biggest hip toss I ever did. And he compared the bumps to working with a guy like AJ Styles or Kurt Angle, and I was like, that is the best. So
Right?
my
Styles is amazing.
my ego just went, sky high. My confidence was insane, and he was telling me, oh, you were awesome. You were amazing. I went to go talk to my head coach about it. He didn't seem as happy, which was a problem because you'd think that he would be ecstatic about hearing that. One of his students got that kind of rub from, the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. um, and then obviously all my other like fellow, trainees with me we're all kind of picking on me for being the air quotes golden boy. And I'm like, guys, this is good for all of us. Like, this is a good representation of the school. If he goes back now and says, oh, this school had, so and so, it's really good, more of TNA will look over here. Like, you've got to understand it as a collective thing. And, I thought to myself, but at least I'll be able to get that match because he was really impressed with me. No, I didn't. He wrestled the head coach and someone with a lot less experience than I did. And was I bitter about that? Yeah. Yes, I definitely was, because I was like, this was so mine. I had earned this so much, and to be told no because I wasn't best mates with the head coach was terrible. And it was, yeah, it was one of those things that definitely put me off wrestling. So, for anyone who's ever wondered, because I did a video on reacting to a few wrestling matches before. So if anyone wonders why I left, it's for reasons like that, where, as Hero mentioned about Avengers, funny enough, in the previous episode, where you want to put your time in and know you're going to get something out of it. Pro wrestling's awful for that. It's one of the worst things in the world, because you could be working, as Hero did, work so hard for so long, and just click, and it's gone. Or you get it taken away from you by some other people. So when I left, I was getting, people were writing Facebook posts about how much I'm, unhumble, how I've gained weight, how I'm lazy. I never do the posters. I never set up the ring. None of this was true. Well, I mean, I might have gained weight, but besides that, none of it was true, And it was all I wanted. All I did was say, I have more value than what you're giving me. At the time, I had the most experience, besides obviously the head coach, and not that much, by the way, out of everyone. So, and, I worked consistently hard for so long that you would imagine that would imply loyalty, would give reward. And that wasn't the case. It was, this guy's a lot bigger. This guy's can do the basics. Let put him in there with Bram, Magnus, all these other names. And I'm like, guys, come on. I'm right here. Even if it's a squash match, just try and elevate the people who have been with you since day one, and it was always a problem with that. And then backstage politics included, I was out. Like, if I complained about anything, it'd be met with pure, distaste. So, for example, I had wrestled a match where it was an intergender-esque match against the evil team. I was a part of the good team, and it would start with me and one of my former friends now, but another female wrestler. And the idea was they'd smack me, I'd go and ready to punch. They'd say real men wouldn't hit a woman, and because I wasn't even 16 yet, I'd do a thing where I'd look down and go, lucky I'm not a real man yet, and kick her in the head.
Jesus.
Which, I mean, here's where that went wrong. The slap. She hit me with a palm across the jaw, and that rocked me so hard, I looked at my team corner and went, what am I doing again? And it was the first 5 seconds, so it's not like I had a lot to remember. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And then she bottled taking the enziguri, and I was so angry because you've just clocked me around the head, well, the face, and
that's a good potato.
Exactly, and you wouldn't at least take the enziguri, because I wasn't ever gonna hurt her, because that's not, it's clearly an accident, but you could have at least, let me, connect a bit. But no, so I went sort of backstage, I tried to give that advice, and obviously it was met with sort of disdain, and I was like, come on, man, I can't seem to win no matter what I say or do. So it was, it was a massive off-putting thing, and it was just met with negativity all the time. So, even though I would say that, obviously, you got to work with or train with, some of these absolute elites in the industry to this day, it's Tyson's kid's career, for example, ended way too soon. Just freak accident,
Hmm.
unfortunately. Um,
I remember when I texted him. I think it was 3 days after the injury with Samoa Joe, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing, buddy?" He's like, "Well, I'm in a hospital bed right now." I'm like, "What?" And he told me what happened. I'm like, "How's Samoa?" Because being it was an accident, I was like, Samoa's probably just broken from this.
I was gonna
And
say,
he's like, he's doing a lot better. He's like, he apologized. I'm like, dude, I'm like, Samoa is one of the nicest guys I've heard of in the industry. So I was like, obviously it wasn't intentional. But with how serious of an injury it was and how scary it was that he had a 5% chance of survival, and the fact that if you're following his Instagram or his Facebook page for his business, Workhorse Fitness, and you see the machine that he is, that's the way he's always been. Like I used to call him half man, half mutant, because Tyson is probably the best part of the wrestling industry in regards to in the ring and out of the ring, because he's so upfront. He's so honest. I remember he was the first person I told that I had to retire, and he was there for me. He didn't judge me, he didn't belittle me, he didn't call me a wimp. He didn't say this time you got to man up. He like legit was like, no, like your health comes first. And so when I saw how he was getting so much success and that to be, fighting his dream match with Rey Mysterio and him and Harry working Shawn and Triple H's DX, I was like, this is amazing. Him in the ring with Undertaker. I was like, this guy's living it up. He's a two-time tag team champion with Cesaro and Davey Boy Smith Jr. So I was like, good job. But then the injury happened, and I was like, so what does this mean? But now he's killing it as a producer for the women's matches, like killing it,
mm,
and he's doing so good. He has he's opened up his new dungeon school, which is like 10 minutes from his house. He said. So he's training Liv Morgan and Lana and a whole bunch of other people going to his school like Brian Pillman Jr. And so I am very appreciative of the great people that I've met on my journey in regards to the professional wrestling industry. But at the same time, I will never forget the negative experiences, the not so much traumatic, but just frustrating and stressful experiences to the point where I look back and I'm like, you know what? Not pursuing wrestling at the level I wanted to was probably the best decision for me, because when I went into the industry, I had 8 or 9 concussions. I had shoulder surgery on my right shoulder, which resulted in arthritis. I had 3 back injuries and I had 2 neck injuries. So like, I went into the industry with a lot of injuries as it was, and I definitely feel like it hindered my progress in the ring because I was very self conscious and I was very scared of getting another concussion. So like I couldn't do drop kicks for the life of me. Natty was trying so hard to teach me to do drop kicks. I could not do them. I don't know what it was. I could not get the height to allow the extension. And she's like, it's okay. She's like, not every wrestler can do a drop kick, but she's like, just compensate with something else that you can do very well. And I was like, I was very good at slamming. Like my the first finisher I was working on was a pop up sit down power bomb, and
oh, I love
I
that.
was naturally like, just think of Kevin Owens pop up power bomb, but I would sit out with it like the Batista
Oh,
bomb.
I've taken one
And
before. It's one of my. I know this is
they're
gonna sound
so
really weird, but I love taking moves more than giving them. Like I'm a
same
Div
here.
Ziggler type of seller, like flopping like a fish. Like I love it, man. It's great.
I used to love take the one spot I did not like taking because I've always had a fear of heights, but I always felt I had no control was back body drops. I've
Oh
always
yeah.
I hated taking those because it's like I feel like if the person giving it to you didn't post or sorry toss you well, you could land on your hip and fracture your hip. You can land on your neck. So it was always an unpredictable bump for me in class. But we used to do them all the time to help overcome that fear. Because bad news is like if you can't take a back body drop, then you should not be in the industry because this industry takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of overcoming fear. But I was like, bad news. I'm like, I'm in the type of wrestling where you don't have a bump for like 6 minutes into the match. It's all grappling, takedowns. Like you're trying, because like I told him, I was like, the current wrestling product that I've been watching, I find too cartoony where you can tell it's paint by the numbers. You can tell it's highly choreographed, where it's, spot 1, spot 2, spot 3. tackle, drop down. You can see that it's very, very, very choreographed. I like the type of wrestling like Luthez, like Carl Gotch, like some of the best
Mm.
catch wrestlers of all time, where they go in there and you believe that they're trying to win. They're not going to do a high flying move and set up to the next spot. Like they're going to take you to the center of the ring, tap you, or pin you. That's the kind of style that I grew up watching. I was huge into Ultimate Warrior because of his look, but his wrestling was atrocious. It was terrible. But his
Yeah.
look was so larger than life. And then I started watching Bret Hart. And I mean, I started watching Bret, like watching his moves, his mannerisms, his psychology. And I was like, damn. Then I started watching Benoit. And my dad was actually training with Benoit. Like my dad would bump for him and just to train with him and spar with him a little bit. And just watching Benoit work, I was like, his intensity and his velocity and just how smooth he was. And I was like, that's the kind of wrestling I always was gravitated towards. And then growing up, I remember when I started wrestling and I was like, you know what? I like the pop up power bomb, but I can't do it to everybody. So I was like, I want a finish that I can do to anybody at any time.
That's a bit of advice
And
I
I was
got a lot as well. Your finisher should be
exactly
something you can
like,
do with everyone. Yeah.
and then like that's why the stunner, the RKO, like got over so well because it could be done to anybody believably. But I remember I was like, but I love AJ Styles. Like when I first watched AJ Styles in TNA, I was like, I love the finisher, the Styles Clash because it's so unique, but it's not believable with everybody. And obviously, it's really risky because 9 people had their neck broken from the move. But I
Mm.
was like, I want to. But I'm like, but I was raised in the industry to be very respectful and to respect the higher ups. So I actually emailed Mike Tenay and TNA trying to get trying to get a hold of AJ to be like, hey, could I pinch your maneuver? Could I use your finish? And I never got a reply, so I never did it. I was like, nope. I'm like, I never got a response. I'm not going to do it. So I started working on I called the bullseye because the gimmick I was working on was called the Iron Bull Dave Body. And the Iron Bull was a inspiration from junior high and high school because when I lost my temper, I would clench my fists and I would like not stomp my feet, but I would like rub my feet against the ground, like, oh my God, I'm going to charge at you. So some kids would call me the Iron Bull in football. So I was like, yeah, the Iron Bull Dave Body sounds like a great. It could be like a tweener gimmick, where it could be like a heel or a face, depending on how it's written. But I was like, it'd be a good gimmick. But then I was like, you know what? It doesn't fit the style that I'm going for, which is technical and snobbish and just in your face. So I started working on a character with Bad News Allen called First Class Dave Body. And the first class gimmick would be like, I'm better than you. And it'd be submission focused. So I created a submission that I called the first class submission, which was a hanging Texas clover leaf that would drop down into an Indian deathlock. So it was brutally painful, but the application process was so arrogant of me. And then that's when the Bad News would call me first class. So when I lost wrestling in 2006, I was devastated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started coaching. I started helping out businesses locally with like marketing, and I even did public speaking at wrestling shows. So during the intermission, I would go in the ring and talk to the kids about bullying. That was something that I was thinking about bringing to all the wrestling promotions to try to bring more of a positive light to the industry of being like, hey, during intermission, Dave Body will be coming to speak about Bodyguards United and speaking about his bullying and depression and his loss of wrestling because I thought my story was very well correlated with the industry. But once again, the backstage politics, I'm like, I can't be around this. I can't have my name attached to drama and toxicity and just dark clouds. So I backed off that project really quickly. So then I was like talking to my doctor, and I was like, listen, I'm really missing wrestling, but I'm not missing the bumps or the toxicity, but I'm missing the submission element of it. So we did a lot of research, and they found that there is a lesser chance of concussions in catch wrestling. Not in the sense of like German suplexes into arm bars, but just submission focused wrestling. And I was like, I also miss self defense, like jujitsu and Muay Thai and the stuff that I was studying in security. So I was able to get clearance finally for the first time in 14 years
to begin catch wrestling training. I was like, yes. I'm like, this is what I want. Like, it brings me back to my competitive athletic roots. But then COVID hit, and I was like, damn it.
That
Of course,
sucks.
the of course, the year that I'm finally, after 14 years, cleared to begin catch wrestling training, COVID-19 hits, and my sensei had to close his school. And then I was like constantly in talks with him. I have his team skin rash is called. It's like the shirt that you can wear that prevents rashing. I have his Team Havoc shirt. I'm ready to go, but it's like now we're finally starting to open, so we're talking about me start catch wrestling training soon,
Mm.
which I'm very excited for. I'm not going to do it competitively. I'm just doing it because I just miss the adrenaline rush. I miss the like when you do security and bodyguard work like I did for almost 9 years, and I dealt with dozens upon dozens of arrests. I was tested for HIV twice. I was slashed with a knife in my left arm, so I have a scar there that I see all the time that reminds me of it. I had 3 concussions from the industry. I dealt with murders. I dealt with gangs. I dealt with drugs. Like that's a lot of emotional baggage to carry. So I was like, I miss being that person that people called for help. Where it's like, hey, like my call sign was 304, so they're like, hey, 304, we have a fight in progress, and I would run to it. Like I miss that adrenaline rush, but I can't do it no more. And that solidified my passion of public
I
speaking and mentorship.
I definitely got to ask you because you're on the topic of security, and I've been wanting to ask you this question for a while, but I really and so this is I feel like I feel like you've been asked this question quite a lot when you've mentioned security, but I just want to throw my name in there. What's the most just craziest thing you've had to do or see while you've been doing security work? Because obviously, a lot of people, security wise, if they're doing work for celebrities, you see crazed fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing stuff at nightclubs, you you see some weird things, really weird things.
Totally. So I have crazy in the sense of funny. I have crazy in the sense of life threatening, and I have crazy in the sense of trauma. So I can do one of each if you want. So funny, I was security manager for Sears, and I was doing a surveillance patrol on the cameras, and I saw a male and a female against a fence, and I was like, I have an idea where this is going. But it was not going that way at all. It went a completely different route. She started urinating all over him and
Oh,
giving him a yeah, she was giving him a golden shower, and he was enjoying it. And I was like,
oh
what
God.
is happening? And then the best part was they tried coming into the store to go shopping.
No
And I
way.
stopped him. I'm like, buddy, what are you doing? He's like, oh, we're here to shop. I was like, my name is Dave. I'm the security manager of the store. I'm like, I cannot let you into the store. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, buddy, I just saw you get a golden shower. Go home and shower. Like, no, you're not coming into my store. And he was like legit confused and then offended.
Of
I was like, why are you offended by this? I'm like, you got peed on and you're trying to come into my store.
No way.
So, there's also another funny one where
Oh
we
God.
had a lot of couples that would make use of the family washroom because they can lock the door because it's for families only.
Oh
And
God.
my supervisor's like, he's like, Dave, this is your chance. I'm like, I got this. And so I did the job, I did the protocol, and I was like, it's over and done with. They're leaving. He's like, okay. And then my buddy Zach, the following week later, we had the exact same type of situation, but in a vehicle. And I was like, you know what, Zach? I dealt with the last one. You can get this one. And it was the best because it was 2 males.
Oh.
And he
Oh.
knocked on the window, and they're like, and he's like, I see his facial expression. I see how he freezes, and he riddles me. He's like 304. This is awkward. And I was like, what's going on? So he told me, and he's like, the most awkward part was they weren't stopping as I was talking to them. So he's like, I felt like I was part of the other situation. I'm like, you had a threesome, you
Aw,
didn't know about it.
that's adorable. He
so,
felt like he was in like
so
a.
those are the funny ones. Like
Oh.
there was a lot of funny ones, especially with that involved intoxicated people, because intoxicated people can lead to a lot of fun and a lot of conversation, especially when you have drug influence too. Like I remember we had a group of teens that we caught using drugs, like not marijuana, but like hardcore drugs. And
Yeah.
one of the kids, like they're like 16, 17 years old, and one of the kids was so high. I was like, okay. I'm like, I need you to look at me. And he's like, okay. I was like, I'm gonna put a box over your head. Obviously, it was not a real box. It was me pretending, but he was so high that he took it as it was literally happening. I was like, I'm going to
Oh
put a
my
box in your
god.
head. And he's like, okay. So I pretend to put a box in his head. I was like, now I need you to listen to me. He's like, I can barely hear you because the box is on my head. I was like, you need to call 911. You need to get you and your friends help. He's like, okay. I was like, now I'm going to take the box off of your head and you're going to be okay. And he's like, okay. So I took I imagine taking a box off of his head. He's like, okay, I can see now. And I was like, oh my God. Um,
You can see now.
when you do like, so when I got into security, my goal was not to do construction sites or anything boring. My goal was like, where can I go that can get me towards policing? And one of the highest rated journeys in that regard was mall cop, becoming a mall
Yeah.
security officer,
Oh, this
because you
is
deal with so many different people. So I was there. It was the most criminally active mall in Alberta, Canada, called
okay.
Marlborough Mall. I was there for 5 years. My very first arrest was a guy who was a registered sex offender,
Oh god.
and a pedophile, and he was stealing panties from different stores. And I was like, why are you doing this? And his exact words to me were, I have a lot of little girls that call me daddy. And I was
Oh.
like, oh my God. So that was
Ooh.
my first realization of how you watch these news broadcasts and you envision hurting people like this. I was like, oh my God, I want to beat this guy senseless. But I couldn't. Um, my second situation was a guy who got stabbed in his knuckles and he was bleeding all over the place, and he was saying he had AIDS and he was throwing his hand everywhere, so that was making blood fly everywhere. So that was a huge situation because we're like, well, we can't believe, or we can't be like, you don't have AIDS, so we had to treat it as if he did. So I was like, that was stressful. But my most stressful was April 17th, 2007. And it's so funny because my concussions and my memory is so bad, but I never forget the emotional moments. And so April 17th, 2007, I was training a new officer. We get a call that is a 132, which is a sudden death. And we're like, what? Okay, so we're like, okay, what's the location? They're like upper level food court. I was like, okay. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, Gary, grab the first aid equipment because we're going to definitely try to revive this person. So we run, we get the first aid equipment, we run to the location, and we see the mother laying face first on the ramp, and her ice cream cone from Dairy Queen is melting down the ramp next to her body. I was like, okay, this is a real situation. Let's get to it. So I flip her over. I was like, all right, begin CPR. Thankfully, there was a off-duty paramedic in the food court. So she came running over. I directed her. I was like, this is what's happening. Please help. So while Gary and her were doing the CPR, her boyfriend was trying to punch my officer Gary in the head because he thought we were hurting her. So obviously he was in shock. So I get him in an arm bar. I calm him. I'm like, dude, I'm like, we're trying to help your wife or your fiance or your girlfriend, whatever she is to you. I'm like, we're trying to help you. While their 2-year-old son is in the shopping cart screaming for his mom to wake up. And I'm like, this is the most emotional and unpredictable situation I've ever dealt with, and I was a supervisor. So I was like, okay, I'm like, Gary, CPR, keep going it. Do not stop until I tell you. I'm like, I don't care if you're covered in sweat, you do not stop. Uh, Paramedics were called. It felt like forever before they arrived, but I was able to calm down the boyfriend. He was able to calm down the son. And this whole situation felt like it was like a half hour long, but it was literally 5 or 6 minutes. And then the paramedics arrived. We had her revived, and she was good to go. And then we found out that she had a pacemaker, and she did cocaine that morning, so the pacemaker gave out.
Oh, right.
And I was just like, I was like, I was like, this was the most intense experience ever because someone's life was in my partner's hand, and I was delegating him while trying to calm down the husband, boyfriend, or fiance, and the son. And I will always say that that moment taught me how important it is to stay calm. Because had I mentally broke down, she probably would have died. Because I wouldn't have, I would have had tunnel vision to the point where I couldn't direct Gary, who was brand new, who had not had first aid training yet. So I had to walk him through the entire process. I'm like, if I was not able to stay calm, she would have died. Or the boyfriend, would have hurt my partner Gary, and then she would have died as a result of that, which would bring on more trauma for the kid and him and everyone in the food court that were watching. So I was like, security, taught me so much about mental health.
For sure.
It taught me so much about staying calm, staying collected, because I did have a lot of adrenaline dumps that were really bad. I remember a funny story. We were arresting a very violent criminal that stole, and he had a screwdriver on him. And he was trying to stab us. So we took him down to the ground, and I start I started going for what's called a femoral knee strike, where in your right and your left leg, basically swimming trunk length from your hip down towards your knee, there's a nerve called the femoral nerve that when you hit it, it makes you feel paralyzed on that side the entire length from your foot all the way up to your right shoulder or whatever side you pick. So it's a very effective knee strike. The problem was because I had such a bad adrenaline dump, I was kneeing my partner, not the
Oh
suspect.
no! No.
And it was a completely human and rookie mistake, but we laughed about it so hard for so long that we actually put it in our training where we're like, this is what happens when you have what's called an adrenaline dump. It's where you can't see or you can't hear or you can't feel. Like you literally just focus on where you're looking. And you like I remember I had an adrenaline dump again where a guy who was under influence of PCP had a butterfly knife and he was trying to stab me with it. So I put him in a triangle choke. But I didn't hear anybody saying, Dave, release, because I was choking him out. But I didn't realize he was fading so fast with how I had the triangle choke on him until people were like touching me, like, Dave, he's done, he's done. So I was like, oh, shoot. So I let go and I was like, okay, he's choked out. And I'm like, that was deadly force, but I had to do it because he was on top of me and he was trying to pull a knife on top of me. And I was like, so I had two choices. I could use deadly force, or I can try defensive tactics to get him to release or get off. But guess what? He was under influence of PCP. So knee strikes weren't working. I tried brachial stuns. They weren't working. I tried other pressure points. Nothing was working. So I said, all right, screw it. I'm going to do deadly force. And that was another situation where I was like, you know what? People talk about all the time that I will kill this person. I'm like, until you're in a situation where you have to make that decision of whether or not to end someone's life to protect yours, don't joke about it, because there are times like this. This happened in 2008, I believe it was, and there was times I still have nightmares from it, where I was like, I legit had to do deadly force on someone to save my life, and it still to this day bothers me. But at the same time, I did it so I can go home to my son, and I was like, I had to do it. Thankfully, he was okay. Like I just, I knocked him unconscious enough to to put the handcuffs on him, and we were taught how to do a palm strike to the lower back of the spine that gives you like a moment to wake up. So when I struck him 3 times with the palm in the lower back, it basically woke him up. And I was like, you're okay. I'm like, but you need to stay calm. And then, everything was good. The police came, they did their investigation, they watched the video. I was cleared of all charges because they're like, everything you did was by the book. I'm like, you're damn right it was, because I take this career very seriously. And then another moment was when a guy, we had called a drunk guy who was being very aggressive outside of a Walmart. So we go there, and as we're on our way, we see him wind up and punch a female paramedic in the face.
God.
And I was like, oh, no, you did not just do that. So we took him down. I used what's called a mandibular angle pressure point, which is very painful, but it was not working because this guy's adrenaline rush was so high, he was not feeling any pain. So they called a separate paramedic unit as well as police, and they had to come and give him an anti-adrenaline needle shot. And I was like, holy cow. Like I dealt with a girl that pulled a knife on me because she wanted to sing a song for King Arthur. She was schizophrenic and she had multiple personality disorder. That was scary because I'm like, okay, so she has mental health, so talking to her is not going to work. But she had a big ass knife on her. So it was a rough 8 years, but it was an 8 years that taught me so much with mental health and stress. And that's the reason why I'm so calm and so content on social media, because it's like I dealt with real criminals. I remember I arrested a guy who was wanted for murder, and the cops were mad that I arrested him because they're like, we were trying to investigate him and watch where he went. I'm like, listen, he came to my store and stole. That's not my fault. It's not my fault. I did my job. They're like, well, they're like, we're not mad at you. They're like, we wanted to see where he was going. I'm like, he came to my store and stole. So from there on, I don't care where he's going. He broke the law. And they're like, no, we get it. So it's like when I see trolls on the internet, it's like, guys, I've dealt with so much real life criminals that I don't take anything on social media serious no more. Like, I don't take any personal attacks or any trolls, because I always strongly believe that the energy that people show online, if it was face to face, they would not show it in person, because it's
Oh
so
no,
easy to be
yeah,
powerful behind a
exactly.
keyboard.
Yeah,
Like, I remember
keyboard
a
warrior.
short I remember a short story here that happened where a guy was on our community page for my community, and on Facebook he was on on the community page, and I was like, he was just talking trash to me on Facebook. Then I saw him in 7-Eleven the next day, and I was like, let's see how this interaction goes. I'm not a person that holds grudges, so in my mindset, it was done. But he's like, oh, hey, Dave, how you doing? I'm doing fantastic. How are you? He's like, oh, I'm doing great. I was like, cool. I'm like, do you want to, talk a little more about how we were talking about yesterday? He's like, oh, no. He's like, it's under the bridge. I'm like, hmm. I'm like, because you did threaten me there. So I just wanted to make sure if that's still a problem. He's like, oh, no, it's under the bridge. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, really, dude? Like,
Yes.
and then I found out that his wife, who is also on the Facebook page, she messaged me. She's like, listen, I'm so sorry for what my husband did, but when he saw you in person and he saw that you're 5'11" and 280 pounds, he backed off. I'm like, I'm not surprised, because this is how society is nowadays. It's so easy to talk trash to people online, but can you have the exact same energy in person? No. Do you know why? Because in person, there's a chance of getting punched in the mouth.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
they're like, I don't want to take that chance, especially when you see a guy who's a former wrestler and security officer and bodyguard, and you're like, okay, you want, and then I confront you, because I'm a confrontational person in the sense where I confront you. I want to squash this. Like, I don't like grudges. I don't like drama. So if I come to you face to face and say, listen, are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with this? Are we done with it? And that's all I wanted. I wanted to confront him and say, listen, are we done? And then he's like, oh yeah, everything is gone. And then his wife calls me, or sorry, not calls me, but texts me. I'm like, really? I'm like, I didn't go there to fight him. I'm like, that's not who I am. I don't start fights, I finish them. Okay. So it's like, I didn't confront him saying, I want to reinvigorate this. I want him to be a man to me, to a fellow man, and say, listen, we're done. But he didn't. And I was like, this is what's wrong with society right now. And that's why when I see all these conversations on Twitter where everyone's bickering back and forth, I shake my head, because I'm like, guys, you guys are both wasting energy, and you both look like children right now. Like, because I guarantee you, if this conversation was face to face, not behind a panel of glass, but like literally you're face to face, the energy would be a lot different. And
For
it's
sure.
such an awareness to how society is. Like, people who attack you, you're probably like, listen, buddy, if we're face to face, would you be saying these words? No. So why do it on social media?
I've
And like,
a point that I want to make, especially before we end today, 2 points as well, is that there's been a lot of conversation within this community, ones that I've had in DMs and on Twitter, and I've said this to friends as well, is that if these were real life conversations, they would not end in ignored. They would end most punches in the mouth, right? Because
right?
because the problem with is that, like, a lot of the times, because it's on social media, is that sometimes it's just easy to be like, yeah, whatever, and ignore it. Whereas, see, that annoys me, because I like to handle social media like I would in my real life. So, and that's obviously, that doesn't work,
I know
right?
where this is going. I know where this is going.
So for example, obviously on Twitter, on videos and stuff like that, and on here, how I talk here is how. I would like to imagine I'd be able to talk to people in real life as well. There'd be a bit of anxiety, obviously, just because I'm socially anxious naturally. But I think once the initial introductions are done, I'd be able to talk the same way. So, because I've been threatened, in this community, in the DMs and stuff like that. And it's like, if you did that to me, to my face, I swear to God, I would not just go, whatever, blocked. I would, oh God. And it is a frustrating. It's something you do have to. It's something you actually do really have to learn, because I'm not someone who, I use a lot of social media, but I've never been a social media presence, as arrogant as that may sound. So getting DMs, getting comments and stuff like that of, like, or calling me certain names and stuff like that, and it's not even just that. It's like, for example, I put on Twitter about, please don't assume you're going to be a guest on Community Voices for the sake of
Yes,
it.
I saw that tweet.
I had, and a reason that went, obviously I won't name anyone because we've patched it, but people were saying, so when's my episode of Community Voices? I was like, what? What? I didn't reach out to you. What do you mean? Like, that's not how this works. Like, you don't go to like, I don't know,
Ellen DeGeneres or
Ellen
Steve
DeGeneres,
Harvey,
exactly.
like,
Hey, when can I be on this, TV show? And it's like, whoa, okay. Like, so, and in real life, that would be met with a bit of like, you're a weirdo, and you'd walk the other way. So it's kind of like, but you can't do that on the internet because there isn't that context, because you can't hear people's words all the time, right? So, it might come across as a joke, but when you've seen that same reply so much, you have to be like, right, let me address this, because it's something that I feel like people are going to start doing the more this series does well, right? And I get it. Community voices, people want a voice. I understand that. But, I can't... If that was the case, by logic, I'd have to fit every single Marvel's Avengers fan on the show at some point. And there's... As much as
there's only 300,000 of them.
Exactly. As much as people want to say it's a dead, as much as people want to say it's a dead game, I would literally need to cover a country's worth of Community Voices episodes. Like,
Hey, Stardust. Let me simplify this for you, okay?
Okay.
All you need to do is 1,000 interviews for 300 days. That's it.
Oh, I can't wait.
Is that not doable for you? Like, this one interview is almost 2 hours. Just do 900 and 999 of those.
And if you don't do them, you're lazy. You're evil.
You're lazy.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeez.
Oh, but another thing I also wanted to bring up as well is you were talking about adrenaline dumps and adrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really important as well is to express how much of a positive weapon adrenaline can be used with. So same
thing with anxiety.
In pro wrestling, I obviously just I mentioned that I have social anxiety, but with pro wrestling, the thing that I always knew that I loved it, because I was always told that if you don't have adrenaline before you do a match, you should probably stop because you don't care as much.
Yep.
Like that, I'm sure you've heard the same thing as well. And obviously, when you've got adrenaline, you'll do anything. Like so
anything.
I remember my first main event match. It was title v title because I was Academy champion, they were heavyweight champion, and we had to do a promo at the start. And I went out there, I did the promo, I went backstage, because I asked the guy I was working with, I said, can we talk about our match after we've done the promo? He was like, yeah, sure, why? Are you okay? I was like, yes, I just really want to put all my energy into each thing first. So, you're listening to music, you're trying to, if anything, I'm trying to build the nerves up, because as soon as you leave the curtain, it explodes out into this charismatic, like, energy that infects the room, because you will not do what the match is designed, if that makes sense. Like, for example, if you're supposed to get thrown off the top rope, you'll do it with style. Like, if you've got adrenaline rush inside of you and you know how to use it as a weapon. So when people used to ask me in school, because I used to wrestle while I was in secondary school, but my social anxiety was that bad I couldn't do full days and I couldn't do public, I couldn't go into like normal classes, but I was able to wrestle. People were like, Tom, how are you able to do that? And I was like, well, one, social anxiety is a mysterious creature.
It very well is.
But also two, there's a massive difference to being a pro wrestler and feeling like a superhero, where people are literally screaming or booing for you, and you autographs. There's a full system to it. There's essentially a routine almost at every show. To going back to school and feeling like I'm a nobody. Right, and that was one of the worst things. It's the Spider-Man Peter Parker treatment of Spider-Man, glorious superhero, unless he's being framed for something, loved by all. Because
JJ.
Exactly. So and then he'll go back to being just Peter Parker with all the money issues, with the probably the girl troubles. What a terrible problem to have, right? Like,
yep.
Go into college or high school or stuff like that. Depending on his age or his job, And that's why that character resonated with me so much, because I felt sort of similar in a sense, and it was, yeah. So you can definitely use your adrenaline as a weapon, and in a positive way, not a bad one. I shouldn't say weapon. Use adrenaline as like a buddy, an ally for yourself. There you go. That sounds less violent.
Oh, it does, because like Peter would definitely use his adrenaline as Spider-Man,
For
but he
sure.
wouldn't use it as Peter Parker
Exactly.
because he's
Whereas
just like
as
it's confusing, but it's understandable too.
exactly. I think that it's one of those things that, I would love to see in written form. So you've probably been asked this a dozen times. If you haven't, I'd be shocked, to be honest. But I would love to see you write a book on all of this stuff. Like a full on, even if it's just like, a Word document that you just put on the front page of your Twitter so that everyone could just read this. Even though they've got these episodes, I would love to be able to just read it as you're typing it, because there's nothing more descriptive, depending on who you are, to be fair, because you might prefer just talking. I mean, public speaker, right? Or so it makes sense. But I would love to just see, it in written form, just being able to, read through the details and so on. And people may not like me, so they might just want to read you. They might just want to read your things. So I think that, you're so incredibly open about your story, and obviously you've got so much, you've got funny moments, you've got traumatic moments, you went through your depression, but you've got a lot of heroic moments and, uprising, and, that's, and sorry, I hope this isn't too rude. How old are you right now?
I am 35.
That's no age at all, given how much you've been through. Like that's, wait, we've had two parts now, and the amount that you have told me, I would have thought, like, obviously I know you're not, but I would have thought you're in your 70s. Like, that's how much life experience you've been able to cramp in there. Some, some bad, some good, some traumatic, some funny, etc. So I definitely think that, there's, even though you are 35, there's so much, to come, because you don't stop in a good way, but you're also a really good advocate for this community and a really good voice. So, when Suki especially was like, "Oh, get Hero Mentor on," it was never the case of, "Oh, that's a good idea, Suki, I'll look into that." It was a case of just when. So when Suki had, put across, "Oh, Hero Mentor," I was like, I was looking through everyone I was talking to, I was like, yeah, I want to do that now, yeah, let's do it. So I messaged you, right, and I was like, you probably expected this message.
I sure did.
Yeah, so
Because
I'm super glad I
because
was able
Suki
to
and,
do
and
this.
and yeah, totally, like Suki and Juan were always mentioning me, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. But to answer your question, my slogan that I always put everywhere is the hero you need is the one you'll become. So to answer your question, you'll probably see that slogan somewhere very soon on paper. Because
Oh.
the hardest part about writing a book is the publisher, to be honest. It's very difficult to figure out if I want to self-publish or hire a publisher. Like it's very like they both have pros and cons. And a lot of my friends are authors. I did have a book that I co-authored in 2014 come out, which was a really good experience, financially as well as goal-orientated. But it's like my own book. It's my struggle with writing is I only write when I'm emotional. I'm only writing when I'm feeling in the mood to write. But
Mhm.
I always had that feeling like my story's not done yet. I still got more that I'm adding to it. So it's like a while ago when I had a Medium account with Medium.com, I actually had a live story, I called it, where every chapter was once a week, and it'd be like a weekly update of like, this is what I dealt with this week, this is what I overcame it, and then I started going backwards and like, okay, in 1997 I dealt with this, and I was like, that was kind of cool to have like a live weekly updated story. So I might go back to that as opposed to writing a book, because book writing is just, you can self-publish, but at the same time, with my ADHD and concussions, I understand there's a lot of that journey I cannot do by myself.
Mhm.
So that's the only thing I'm dealing with, is whether or not I want to self-publish. hire a publisher or do a live story update again. So, but it's definitely in the works. It's been in the works for 6 years now.
Oh my!
So it's
I've
yeah, it's
always
definitely.
I've always been curious because like I have a brother and sister with ADHD, but everyone's different. So for example,
Mhm.
my brother is not a very focused writer, right? So if I'm sat next to him and he's texting away, he'll get bored of it and just do a voice message. Like it's just like I'm sick and tired. I want to do this voice message and go to someone else, right? So do you find that while you're writing, and this will have to be the last question if you don't mind, but the while you're writing, do you find that like you can focus onto it, or is there just so much going on? You're like, oh, hang on, maybe I need to do this now, because like obviously writing takes so much focus, and it's such a like there's not a lot going on while you're writing. You know what I mean? There's not, unless you play some music or something. But so how is that like for you? Are you able to focus on something like writing, or is it sort of in that similar vein of, oh God, I need to get off, what I'm doing. I need to go and do something just to kind of break the quiet of writing, I suppose.
So for me, I use a thing called the Pomodoro technique, which is so the human brain can focus intensely for a total of 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you start to get very fatigued.
Mhm.
So what I do for my energy levels is I do a timer for 25 minutes, and then I take a 5 minute break. 25 minutes, 5 minute break. I do that 4 times. So it's a total of 4 sets of 25 and then 4 sets of 5 minute break. That's how I write. Because if I try to go past 25 minutes, my brain taps out on me.
Mm.
So 25 minutes, 5 minute break, 25 minutes, 5 minute break. It's also a process that I use for my son for his homeschooling because he's ADHD as well. And it just works tremendously. And funny that you said about your brother, because I personally don't like doing phone calls. I get so bored on phone calls because I pace. I cannot stand on a phone or sit on a phone call. I walk back and forth. I go up and down the stairs. I climb on top of the beds. I climb off the beds. Like it's such a
Yeah.
weird process. My fiance, she hates it. She's like, "Oh, here we go, days pacing again." I can't sit still. But it's funny for podcast episodes, I can sit still because I'm active in the conversation. I'm attentive. I'm passionate. I'm excited. But phone calls, I'm just like I'm bored. Or I prefer texting though. If I can text, I would definitely love texting. I don't like voice notes. The reason why I don't like voice notes is you can't edit those. So if I say something that's wrong, it's like I can't edit it. It's like, damn it, I can't rewind that and say it again. And with ADHD, I have a very bad habit of not thinking before I speak, which leads to a lot of issues.
I mean, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you could, it's like wearing
It
your
is
heart
when
on your
someone asks
sleeve.
you a question like, "Does this make me look fat?" And I say, "Well, it doesn't make you look thin." And it's like, ah.
Oh, I
And I'm
mean,
just like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
I'd
I shouldn't have
appreciate.
said that." And I said,
I'd appreciate. I would appreciate the honesty. To be honest, like if I wore a dress one day, and I thought, I need some advice. I'd message you because then I'd
"Come
know
to me."
you tell me the truth. That's
It's
right.
I'm definitely not saying to be a jerk. I'm saying it because it's just I respect you enough to be honest with you. And I think that's the reason why I excelled so much as a mentor is because these kids, they finally had someone that was like, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not going to be an easy journey, but we'll get through it together. And that's what you need sometimes. You need that brutal, blunt honesty because it shows the person respects you enough to give you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Because what you want to hear just helps you keep in your comfort zone. Sometimes you got to hear that, like, no, Stardust, that is a foolish decision. Here's why, and here's a suggestion of how to change it. And you'll be like, I never thought of that suggestion. I'm like, well, that's because no one was ever telling you anything. I was all like, oh, you're fine, you're okay. No, sometimes you need that kick in the ass.
Mm. Well, after being told
Yeah, you got
to
it.
after being told to receive that kick in the ass, if there's something
Yep.
going on. So basically, in certain words, you're like, Stardust, look, don't wear the dress, all right? Don't send me that picture, please.
I mean, if you can if you want, but be aware that it might spread around through the community. And that's a
You
risk you
just-
gotta take.
I can't wait for one of like you start a YouTube channel and the first thumbnail is just that picture.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It'll be
okay.
a good rib. It'll be a good.
Yeah. Anyway, so regardless, though, thank you for just sitting here with me and just having this conversation. It's been really good. I mean,
Of course.
because before I did this with you, I have not done a community voices with someone who I haven't been super close with previously. So obviously, me and High Ruler, we do the weekly recap and we speak all the time. Sonic's the same. Suki I've known for a long time, whereas obviously we're quite unfamiliar with each other. Not anymore, obviously, but like I mean, 4 hours each. We've gone into a lot of stuff, but it's nice to know that I've been able to speak with you, who's obviously quite a big advocate for mental health, while I'm also challenging myself with my own mental health to be able to be like, right, if I want this series to do well, I need to say screw it and speak to people who aren't in my own inner circle bubble. And, now that I know that I can do that, thanks to you, it's a lot more confident, For example, how do I give this clue away? Oh, okay. I've got to think of this without giving it away. Oh! Let me think. Okay. I am in talks to get a very, very important within the community guest on the show that uses Twitch. That's as far as I think I can go with that. I was gonna say
Okay.
more. That says nothing because it's like, well, what's they stream on a specific time. That's it. Okay. I'm done now. Oh Jesus. But so either way, it's exciting stuff. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with Hero Mentor, please make sure to check out part 1. That will be in the description down below. Please make sure to check out all of your socials. Hopefully, a lot of people send you love. It seems that people seem to love it, so hopefully they love this one as well, even though it's longer. God damn it, Hero
Right?
Mentor.
I'm sorry. You can't invite a motivational speaker to a podcast
I
and
said
expect
this.
a short episode.
My friends actually were like, "Wow, that's a long one." I was like, "Guys, he's literally a public speaker." Like, did you not?
I'm paid to speak, buddy.
I was gonna say that's literally his bread and butter. If this was a short one, I would be like, I don't know how he's
Just to give you context, my longest speaking appearance was 8 hours, and I fulfilled it. So, if you want this to be a 6-hour podcast, I can do that. I'll be tired for the next 2 or 3 days afterwards, but I can definitely commit.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that, and if people want part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then I'm sure we can do that, because you'll probably live your day tomorrow and have another 2 hours worth of things to tell me.
Exactly.
And talk about. So
I always have stories.
That's always one of the best things. So either way, as I was saying, please make sure to check out Hero Mental down below. All my own socials will be there if you want to keep in touch. It's been a lovely break. Also, positive news. I think your positivity was infectious because my charger started working.
Nice, there he goes.
So essentially, what ended up happening was, for anyone who was out of the loop, obviously my charger stopped working. So I put it on conversion mode for a little bit, which essentially takes your battery completely off until it gets to a certain percentage, so it keeps the battery life going. So I left that on for a little bit, and then halfway through, while Hero was talking, I thought, hold on, let me switch it off and see what happens, and now it's 100%. So thank you for the positive vibes to my laptop. Now I don't have to take
You're very welcome.
Now I can relax. So that's brilliant. So thank you for being here. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.